Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, Instagram. Hello, YouTube. I am going live today. I'm going to be chatting all about my best tips for homeschooling with littles underfoot. If you are new to homeschooling or currently homeschooling and you have school agers, at least one, and then you have littler kids, at least one littler kid, I'm sure you already know by now that it can be really, really hard. If it's super easy for you, great. You can leave this live because you've already got it all figured out. Even though I have some tricks up my sleeve, it still can be really hard at times. I have a 1-year-old now, so we're just entering this phase of what I'm going to be talking about today. And I have a 5-year-old now who's kind of left this stage. And now, after implementing a lot of the things I'm going to talk about in this live, we have a much better time. And she's now on the verge of school age. We do some homeschool, but she also just plays on her own or will hang out around us and not interrupt anymore because we have implemented all this stuff. So if you are, if you've ever homeschooled and tried to read a book or do an activity or teach a math lesson and you've had a little who maybe decides right then that's when they're going to color on furniture to try to get your attention, which they've never done before, or that's when they're going to spill something all over the floor, or that's when they're going to just stand at you and pull on your shirt till they get your attention, or just fuss, or want to be held the whole time, which is, fine to some degree, but sometimes not always practical if you're like trying to do a science experiment or something. If you've ever lived with typical toddler preschooler behavior in your homeschool, you know that it can be overwhelming sometimes. It can be a little frustrating at times. It can be stressful. And so I wanted to share, as somebody who's been through this process and has come out the other side and has a lot of tips to share. I just want to give some of my wisdom today to help you, both practical tips as well as mindset shifts, because for me, fixing this in my homeschool when I had like a really rough year, when I want to say my youngest daughter was around 2 to 3, was really hard. And so the mindset shifts are really gold. Before you do the other practical things, the practical things can work, but if your mind isn't right, a lot of this other stuff isn't going to work. And so I'm going to talk a little bit, just some of like 10 of my best tips for homeschooling with toddlers or preschoolers, littles underfoot, when you're trying to focus and teach your older kids. And as your kids get older, your older kids get older, like there's more for them to do. Also, they can take over more of their education. But I know I'm kind of in that spot with a 5th grader where I'm still doing 90% of the teaching and I'm having her like go read on her own a very little bit right now. I probably could do more, but I like to read the books with her and stuff like that. So it takes a few hours. Like we're homeschooling for about 3 hours now as like our dedicated homeschool time. And obviously you can't expect a toddler to leave you alone for 3 hours. That's just not possible. And honestly, as a homeschool family, a lot of us want to be around our kids and we want our kids involved in things. And so the big question is like how to stay sane, stay kind, stay loving to our kids and our littles and not push them away, but also how to help them when developmentally they can't just like play nicely for 3 hours right by you, especially at those younger ages without being taught. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So if I mention anything and you're watching on YouTube and a link to something, you can find it in the description. If you're watching on Instagram, you can just comment links, or at the replay, you can comment links and it'll send you the links. So that way you have them whenever I mention anything in here, because I'll be mentioning a few different things. So my first tip is to stop expecting your toddler to act like a big kid. I know this is something, just for context, when I was having a really hard time with my youngest daughter, I also was going through a family tragedy at the time, like my dad, or crisis, I guess you could say. My dad had he was in the hospital recovering or healing. I don't even know the right word, dealing with a really bad traumatic brain injury. And so I was torn between the hospital. I was torn between home. This was literally 3 years ago, like I just had on Time Hop pop up when I was on the news talking about it, and it was just like yesterday. So this is 3 years ago, and it was just an incredibly stressful emotional time for me. So obviously, I also didn't really have the bandwidth to do a lot of the things I'm talking about, but or to figure that out until we were kind of over that fog, and then I was able to step back and like reassess the situation. So keep that in mind. Like all those behaviors just become exacerbated when you have any kind of extra stress in your life, or financial stress, or relational stress, whatever it may be, can just become exacerbated. And so that's why I want to talk about this, because sometimes when you're in those states, or you're just stressed out from trying to homeschool, maybe you're new to homeschool and you're trying to deal with all that, and then you've got this little who now all of a sudden is acting like a totally different kid because you're trying to focus. Um, this hopefully will give you some things to think about that sometimes our mind doesn't go to because we're just so frustrated and lost with all the things going on in our life. So, like I said, stop expecting your toddler to act like a big kid. When I was going through this, like 6 months to a year of just a really hard time in our homeschool with my little, I had another little at the time. She wasn't homeschool school age yet. She just did a lot better with homeschool, and then I was watching other people's kids. Like it was just a crazy time. But I just kind of expected, like, this is dumb to think back on. I was just kind of dumb at the time, but uh, I had a lot going on. And so I was just kind of expecting my daughter to act much older than she was. And I was getting frustrated when she wasn't doing that, when I never gave her the tools or stayed consistent to help teach her that. And so this isn't necessarily a discipline problem. This is partially, you could say it's a discipline problem, but it's also a developmental problem or issue, that we're expecting our littles to act perfectly when they haven't been taught how to act, and they also may not fully be ready to act in that way. And so toddlers and little ones, they're wired to move. We're wired as humans to seek connection. They are wired to test boundaries and see, okay, mom said this, let's try that and see if she really meant it. Like that's just developmentally how little kids are. Um, and so we should expect them to do those things. And I think I was expecting them to just be perfect and then getting frustrated every single day, because clearly that's just not realistic. So toddlers, if you start to shift your mindset of they're not being bad, they are wanting connection, or they are testing boundaries to see what sticks and what